Yosemite National Park, a place of towering cliffs, timeless waterfalls, and forests that whisper ancient secrets. But beauty can be a killer. Behind the breathtaking views are stories of blood-curdling accidents, reckless bravery, and even murder. After all, Yosemite's name comes from a Miwok word meaning they are killers. Join us as we delve into 5 of the most disturbing deaths in the park's history. But don't wander too far. Yosemite has a way of keeping its visitors permanently.
The first rays of sunlight spilled over the horizon on September 6, 2021, bathing Joel Thomazin in a warm, golden glow as he stood at the threshold of his home. His wife Amanda watched him with a bittersweet mix of pride and unease. Joel, a 31-year-old Army Reserve from Denair, California, hoisted his yellow and gray Kelty backpack onto his strong shoulders, ready to embark on a solo hike into Yosemite National Park, a place he had known and loved since childhood. This wasn't just another outing for Joel. With meticulous planning and military precision, he had mapped out a journey from Hetch Hetchy to Lake Eleanor, a remote reservoir cradled in the park's northwestern corner. His pack held all the essentials: a sleeping bag, a hammock, even a red inflatable kayak for the tranquil waters he hoped to conquer. His return was planned for September 9th. As they exchanged what seemed to be a routine farewell, Amanda couldn't shake an unspoken worry, a sense of foreboding she couldn't quite name. Joel was no novice. Standing tall at 5'10" and in peak physical condition, he was an experienced outdoorsman, a skilled hiker, and an adept canoeer. Yet, even the most prepared adventurers can't always anticipate the wilderness's secrets. The trek began as expected. Joel passed through the Hetch Hetchy Trail, greeted fellow hikers, and pressed on into Yosemite's rugged embrace. The serenity of the park welcomed him, the towering trees whispering in the gentle breeze. But as the hours turned to days, Joel seemed to vanish, disappearing as if swallowed whole by the very wilderness he cherished. When Joel failed to return on September 9th, Amanda's unease turned to panic. Days of silence stretched into an unbearable void. Unable to wait any longer, she contacted Yosemite's park authorities, setting into motion a search that would grow into one of the park's most perplexing mysteries. Search and rescue teams mobilized swiftly. Rangers, search dogs, helicopters, kayaks, and boats combed the park's vast and unforgiving terrain. From the open stretches of Hetch Hetchy to the secluded depths of Lake Eleanor, they searched tirelessly. Every trail, crevice, and waterway was scrutinized, but there was no trace of Joel, no footprints, no gear, not even a clue. It was as if he had been erased from the landscape. The park, breathtaking in its beauty, now carried an ominous weight. Joel's disappearance wasn't an isolated incident. Yosemite had seen its share of enigmatic vanishing acts, particularly among solo hikers. Fred Zakar, James Youngblum, and even Richard Judd each vanished without a trace, leaving behind only unanswered questions. Joel's case, however, seemed especially haunting. Even the search dogs, trained to track the faintest scent, came up empty. Weeks turned into months, and the relentless search began to feel futile. Amanda, torn between hope and despair, clung to the possibility of a miracle. But as the wilderness held its secrets close, the reality grew darker. Yosemite, a place of unparalleled natural beauty, had transformed into a stage for a chilling mystery. To this day, Joel Thomazin's fate remains unknown. The silent trees, the still waters, and the vast, unyielding landscape of Yosemite stand as mute witnesses to his disappearance. His story, like the others who vanished before him, lingers as a ghostly whisper in the park's majestic canyon. The allure of Yosemite, with its towering peaks and sprawling wilderness, remains undiminished. Yet, for those who venture into its depths, there is an unshakable reminder. Its beauty can conceal a darkness that defies understanding, a mystery that echoes through time, refusing to be solved.
Tomer Frankfurter wanted one thing as he climbed over the edge of Yosemite's Nevada Fall, a jaw-dropping photo to crown his U.S. adventure. He wasn't afraid. Why would he be? At 18, fear isn't on the radar. Invincibility is the currency of youth, and Tomer was cashing in. It was September 4th, 2018, and Tomer, on a 2-month tour of the U.S., had a full itinerary ahead of him before returning to Israel to begin his mandatory military service. For now, though, he was soaking up Yosemite's grandeur, joined by a family friend from Fresno. The duo had chosen the iconic Mist Trail, a hike known for breathtaking scenery and equally breathtaking effort. The weather that day was classic Yosemite, warm, sunny, and inviting. Tomer and his friends started the trek together, but somewhere along the way, the bustling trail separated them. No matter, it wasn't long before Tomer found himself in the company of fellow adventurers, a group of tourists from Israel, Germany, and beyond. Friendships on trails form quickly, and the newly assembled group pressed on toward the crown jewel of the hike, the top of Nevada Fall, a 594-foot waterfall that roars with the might of the Merced River. The climb was tough, but the payoff worth every step. The summit offered a panorama straight out of a postcard, the valley sprawling beneath the cascading water. Lunch seemed the perfect way to celebrate, so the group settled in to refuel with sandwiches and the kind of views that could make even a peanut butter and jelly feel like fine dining. But as the others packed up to head back, Tomer had a spark of inspiration, or perhaps folly. He'd seen a viral photo online, a tourist at Brazil's Telegraph Rock dangling off the edge of a cliff thousands of feet above ground. The catch? That Brazilian cliff was a trick of perspective, a mere 3 feet off the ground. Tomer, however, wasn't privy to this detail. Excited by the idea, he handed his smartphone to one of the women in the group and asked her to capture his own death-defying moment. His new friends, alarmed, tried to talk him out of it, but Tomer was adamant. Ignoring their protests, he tossed his backpack aside and climbed over the edge of Nevada Fall. Hanging from the cliff, he struck his pose. The camera clicked, and for a few moments everything seemed fine. Then came the shout, "Help!" At first, his companions thought he was joking, but when they saw his arms trembling, his grip faltering, the mood turned to panic. Several rushed to his aid, reaching desperately to pull him back, but the slick sheen of sweat on his arms made it impossible. There was nothing to hold on to, no rope, no safety net. And then it happened. Tomer slipped. In an instant, he plunged nearly 600 feet to the rocks below, near the Merced River. He died on impact, leaving the group horrified and helpless. Tomer Frankfurter's tragic story is a somber reminder that even the most picturesque places demand respect. Yosemite's beauty may be timeless, but it's also unforgiving, an awe-inspiring reminder that nature doesn't take risks, it simply enforces them.
The dense, whispering trees of the Sierra National Forest hold secrets. Among them is the chilling tale of Sandra Johnson Hughes, a 53-year-old survivalist and lover of the wild who ventured into the wilderness and seemingly disappeared into thin air. What began as a solitary escape into nature turned into a sinister mystery that has left investigators and family haunted by unanswered questions. On June 26, 2020, Sandra shared her plans with loved ones. The chaos of the world, amplified by a global pandemic, had pushed her to seek solace in the mainland's rugged beauty after leaving her home in Hawaii. Known for her self-reliance and meticulous nature, Sandra was the epitome of a seasoned outdoors woman. Her destination, the Sierra National Forest, with the possibility of visiting Yosemite. As July began, Sandra made her way to Johnson's Meadow, a serene and remote area approximately 10 miles south of Yosemite. To those who knew her, this was Sandra's element. She thrived in the wilderness. But what transpired over the next several days would shroud her journey in mystery and darkness. On July 4th, hikers spotted Sandra walking barefoot through the forest, her face marred by a visible bruise. Concerned, they approached, offering help. She declined, insisting she was fine. This brief encounter would be the last confirmed sighting of Sandra before her trail went cold. The next day, officials discovered her campsite. It was a scene of inexplicable chaos. Her belongings, usually kept with meticulous care, were strewn haphazardly. Documents were scattered, gear left in disarray. It was as if someone or something had disrupted her tranquil retreat. Nearby, a second unsettling clue emerged. Sandra's silver SUV was found abandoned near Chiquito Creek, north of her campsite. The vehicle had crashed, though at a speed so slow it defied logic. What had caused her to veer off the path in such an isolated area? Theories swirled. Was she startled by an animal, or was there a far more ominous force at play? Days later, on July 12th, Sandra's sleeping bag was discovered 2.5 miles north of the SUV, just inside Yosemite National Park's boundary. The discovery deepened the mystery. Why had she traveled in that direction? Was she trying to signal for help, or was she fleeing from someone or something unseen? The wilderness offered no answers. Then, on August 9th, 2 hunters reported seeing Sandra near Portuguese Creek. The woman they described was thinner than in the missing person posters, dressed in overalls and a floral shirt. She was leaning against a tree, sipping water, and appeared oddly serene. This sighting rekindled hope, but Sandra's trail vanished again, leaving searchers baffled. For nearly a year, Sandra's case languished in eerie silence until July 2021, when the unexplainable resurfaced. The Gorba family, hiking near Shut-Eye Peak, stopped for lunch when their 3-year-old son, Caden, spoke of seeing a woman. "There's a woman in the meadow," Caden said, his voice chillingly matter-of-fact. "She's lying face down. Her legs are straight up. She can't talk or move." The family was stunned. They found nothing where the child claimed the woman had been. Subsequent searches by authorities yielded no evidence, yet Caden's words lingered, a haunting echo that hinted at a ghostly presence in the wilderness. To this day, the Sierra National Forest guards Sandra's fate like a jealous secret, its vast, tangled expanse offering only fragments of her story. Was she consumed by the unforgiving wilds, or did something far darker claim her? The disappearance of Sandra Johnson Hughes remains an enigma, her once vivid presence now a shadow cast over the Sierra's timeless beauty. As the forest grows and shifts, it carries the weight of her story, whispering to those who dare to listen, the truth is here, hidden among the trees.
El Capitan, Yosemite's iconic granite giant, rises 3,000 feet into the sky, beckoning adventurers from around the globe. To some, it's a breathtaking marvel of nature. To others, it's just a ridiculously big rock. But then there's a rare breed of individuals who see it as something far more, a life's calling, a soul-feeding challenge, and their very reason for being. Tim Klein, 42, from California's Leona Valley, and Jason Wells, 45, from Boulder, Colorado, were proud members of this elite group. For them, El Cap wasn't just a climb, it was magic. Jason even called it his magic stone. On the morning of June 2nd, 2018, the 2 seasoned climbers were doing what they loved most, speed climbing El Cap's free blast route on the Salate Wall. This wasn't their first dance with the monolith. Between them, they'd conquered El Cap nearly 200 times, with about 70 of those ascents as a team. They were legends in the climbing community, admired not just for their skill and speed, but also for their joyful spirits and razor-sharp safety practices. Their bond, forged over decades of climbing together, allowed them to tackle the wall with a rhythm and grace that inspired awe. Joining them that day was a 3rd climber, Kevin Prince. It was a typical Saturday on El Cap, bustling with climbers. As the trio ascended, they encountered Jordan Cannon and his team, passing them with ease. To Cannon, it looked like Tim and Jason were simul-climbing, moving simultaneously while tied to the same rope. Kevin, meanwhile, was solo climbing up a separate rope Tim had anchored above. The climbers made swift progress through the challenging pitches, but as they approached the mammoth terraces, around 8:15 a.m., their years of skill and luck tragically unraveled. Cannon, climbing below, heard a sickening thud. He looked up just in time to see Jason Wells plummeting. Jason fell nearly 200 feet, stopping briefly before plunging again, slamming into the wall. Then came the screams. Tim Klein had fallen too. For a fleeting moment, the rope caught behind a block, leaving the men suspended in midair. But fate had other plans. The rope severed, and both men tumbled nearly 1,000 feet to the valley floor. The climbing community reeled. How could 2 of its most accomplished and meticulous climbers meet such a fate? Investigators couldn't pinpoint the cause. Cannon later noted it was impossible to tell if they'd placed gear between them since the rope had been severed just above Tim's knot. Their tragic fall remains one of Yosemite's enduring mysteries. Tim Klein and Jason Wells left behind more than just a legacy of incredible ascents. Tim, a beloved high school teacher and 2-time Teacher of the Year, is remembered for his kindness and dedication to his students. He leaves behind a wife and 2 young sons. Jason, an investment manager by day and passionate climber by heart, is celebrated for his zest for life and boundless love of adventure. El Capitan has long been a stage for human triumph and tragedy. For Tim and Jason, it was both a playground and a cathedral, a place where they defied gravity and embraced life at its fullest, until the day it claimed them.
What began as a joyous girls' getaway in February 1999 turned into a horror that would forever haunt Yosemite National Park's history. For 42-year-old Carol Sund, her 15-year-old daughter Julie, and 16-year-old Silvina Palazzo, the excitement of their 4-day vacation masked the lurking shadow of an unthinkable fate. On February 12th, Carol and Julie departed their home in Eureka, California with Silvina, an Argentine exchange student who had become like family. Their destination, Yosemite National Park. The trio boarded a flight to San Francisco with eager hearts, their plans meticulously laid. Carol had even rented a red 1999 Pontiac Grand Prix to ensure they could explore the area comfortably. The trip was meant to be a perfect blend of adventure and bonding, culminating in a reunion with Carol's husband Jens before joining him on a business trip to Arizona. The first leg of their journey unfolded without incident. Julie competed in a cheerleading contest in Stockton, and from there, they drove to El Portal, California, checking into Cedar Lodge on February 14th. Surrounded by Yosemite's breathtaking beauty, the trio spent the next day hiking its iconic trails, blissfully unaware that safety ended where the wilderness began. When they returned to Cedar Lodge that evening, the plans for an early checkout and a smooth return to San Francisco seemed set in stone. But what awaited them that night was no longer in their control. The following morning, February 16th, Jens Sund waited anxiously at the San Francisco airport. The women never arrived. His unease quickly turned to dread when calls went unanswered. Desperate, he contacted authorities. At first, the details were strange but not alarming. The checkout had been completed, the room was tidy, and the keys were left behind. Yet there was no sign of Carol, Julie, or Silvina. Even the Pontiac Grand Prix had vanished. The search began immediately. Rangers, local police, and volunteers combed Yosemite's vast terrain. Days turned to weeks. Then, a chilling clue surfaced. Carol's wallet was inexplicably found in Modesto, miles away. It was intact, raising disturbing questions. Were they alive? Had they been taken? The suspense deepened. The devastating breakthrough came on March 18, 1999, more than a month after their disappearance. The Pontiac was discovered, burned, and abandoned in a remote area of Stanislaus National Forest, known locally as a dumping ground. Inside the charred vehicle, investigators found the unrecognizable remains of 2 bodies. They were later identified as Carol Sund and Silvina Palazzo. Forensic analysis confirmed the unthinkable. Both women had been murdered, but Julie was missing. The possibility that she might still be alive lingered, a faint glimmer in an otherwise grim case. Then, a week later, a taunting note arrived. "We had fun with this one," it read, scrawled in chilling handwriting. It included a map marking Julie's location. On March 25th, near Lake Don Pedro in Tuolumne County, searchers found her body. Severely decomposed, Julie had suffered a brutal death. Her throat had been slashed. The heinous nature of the crime shocked the nation. The case took a dark turn again in July 1999 when another woman, 26-year-old Joey Ruth Armstrong, was found murdered near her cabin. Witnesses reported a blue vehicle near the scene, and investigators traced it to Cedar Lodge handyman Carrie Stainer. Stainer, 37, had already been questioned in connection with the Sund Palazzo murders. At the time, he seemed cooperative, blending seamlessly into the backdrop of the investigation. But when he was confronted again, the mask slipped. Stainer confessed in grisly detail to the crimes that had left the nation reeling. On February 15, 1999, Stainer had entered the Sund's motel room under the pretense of needing help. Armed and calculating, he promised the women he wouldn't harm them if they cooperated. He lied. Stainer bound and gagged them, strangled Carol, and shot her to ensure her silence. He then sexually assaulted and killed Silvina before taking Julie to a remote location, where he subjected her to further abuse before slitting her throat. Stainer later claimed insanity, but the brutality of his crimes and his calm demeanor afterward told another story. He was sentenced to death 3 times, one for each life he took. Now, 62 years old, Carrie Stainer remains on death row. His horrific acts left scars, not just on the families of his victims, but on the very spirit of Yosemite National Park, a place once synonymous with tranquility and natural splendor. The murders serve as a grim reminder that even amidst the most stunning landscapes, darkness can lurk, waiting to claim its next victim.
On the morning of July 25, 2021, Richard Judd, a spirited 72-year-old with a deep love for adventure, set off into the rugged wilderness of Yosemite. Richard was the kind of man who defied his age, often tackling physically demanding activities like hiking and camping with the enthusiasm of someone half his age. That day, he was joined by a hiking partner as they set out to explore the untamed beauty of the Sierra National Forest. Their journey began at the Quartz Mountain Trailhead, about 23 miles south of Lower Merced Pass Lake. There was excitement in the air as the duo prepared to embark on a classic backcountry adventure. Richard, dressed in a blue shirt and gray pants, was the epitome of a seasoned adventurer. Standing 5'11" and weighing 150 pounds, he moved with a quiet confidence, his backpack packed with all the essentials for the trip ahead. The duo parked their vehicle, made their final gear checks, and then ventured into the wilderness. The landscape around them was pristine, a perfect blend of towering trees and rugged mountains, with every step promising a new discovery. The pair shared conversation and laughter as they soaked up the beauty of the journey. The first leg of their hike led them to a campsite near Lower Merced Pass Lake, a peaceful spot about 15 miles from the famous Mist Trail, which leads hikers toward Half Dome. The night was spent under the stars, with the sound of the nearby lake lulling them into a restful sleep. The next morning, they set off on a day hike toward Lower Ottaway Lake and Red Peak Pass, eager to tackle the 3.5-mile trail. The Sierra scenery, with its dramatic vistas and crisp air, only fueled their excitement as they continued onward. But somewhere between Lower Merced Pass Lake and Lower Ottaway Lake, things took an unexpected turn. Richard and his partner became separated, an unintended split in the wilderness. Perhaps Richard had surged ahead, lost in the beauty of his surroundings, or maybe he had stopped to rest and take in the view. Either way, his hiking partner continued on, assuming they would meet up at the next landmark. But as they reached the end of the trail, Richard was nowhere to be found. At first, Richard's partner wasn't too concerned. It seemed unlikely that Richard would be far behind, and maybe he had taken a detour for a photo or to explore a new path. But as minutes turned into hours, anxiety began to take hold. Richard, always reliable and punctual, hadn't shown up. The partner waited, hoping for any sign of him. When none came, the situation became more serious. The partner alerted Yosemite's rangers, and a search operation was quickly launched. What followed was an extensive, yet ultimately fruitless, search. Rangers scoured the wilderness, combing through the vast terrain in hopes of finding any trace of Richard. But despite their best efforts, he had disappeared without a trace, as though the forest had swallowed him whole. His disappearance added yet another chilling chapter to Yosemite's long history of missing hikers, a sobering reminder of the park's wild and unpredictable nature. Yosemite's stunning vistas may inspire awe, but they also conceal hidden dangers. Between 2014 and 2019, Yosemite's search and rescue teams were called into action for an average of 240 missions each year. In 2020, an analysis ranked the park as the 14th deadliest national park in the U.S., with 28.1 deaths per 10 million visits, a stark contrast to its serene reputation as a natural paradise. For Richard, the wilderness that had been his source of adventure became an enigma. His fate remains unknown, a haunting mystery woven into the vast expanse of Yosemite's backcountry. To this day, Richard Judd's story stands as a cautionary tale for those who venture into the wild. While nature's beauty may be boundless, so too are its secrets. For all the majesty of the wilderness, it's impossible to ignore the danger lurking just beyond the trail.
On July 2nd, 2023, the wilderness of Yosemite National Park buzzed with life under the oppressive summer heat. Hayden Klemenach, a vibrant 24-year-old with a passion for adventure, stood on the edge of Chilnualna Creek, the rushing waters glistening like liquid silver under the sun. Born on November 11th, 1998 in Santa Rosa, California, Hayden was the epitome of energy and courage. An athlete at heart, he had poured his passion into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, earning his blue belt with pride, and spent spent his childhood perfecting his swing on the baseball fields of Petaluma Valley. To Hayden, challenges weren't obstacles, they were invitations. When his friends proposed a hike to Yosemite, Hayden didn't hesitate. Adventure coursed through his veins, and he eagerly packed his gear, ready to conquer another trail. The group set out toward Chilnwalna Falls, a stunning yet treacherous path renowned for its majestic waterfalls and unforgiving terrain. As the morning stretched into afternoon, their laughter filled the humid air, their friendship propelling them forward. But as the sun blazed overhead, fatigue set in. Seeking relief, they veered toward the inviting waters of the creek, unaware of the deadly force that lurked beneath its calm surface. Hayden crouched at the water's edge, splashing his face to cool down. The icy rush felt refreshing against his flushed skin, but in an instant, that moment of peace turned to chaos. A sudden surge in the current, a force of nature as relentless as it was unforgiving, swept him off balance. His friends froze, horror-stricken, as Hayden was pulled into the roaring torrent. His cries for help drowned beneath the thunderous cascade of water. Panic gripped the group as they watched him struggle against the ferocious current, his form becoming smaller and more distant with every second. The river, swollen from snowmelt and merciless in its power, was a deadly foe. Torn between the instinct to save their friend and the undeniable danger of the situation, they hesitated, knowing one wrong move could claim another life. Helplessly, they called for emergency services, their voices shaking with fear and guilt. For days, Yosemite's rescue team scoured the rugged terrain, their search hindered by the river's ferocity. On July 9th, 2023, the heartbreaking reality surfaced. Hayden's lifeless body was found near Chilnwalna Creek. The location was so perilous that it took another 24 hours to retrieve him. His parents, Kevin and Michelle, who had rushed to the park with hearts heavy with hope, were confronted with their worst nightmare. The news sent shockwaves through Hayden's tight-knit community. The adventurous young man, known for his infectious smile and unwavering determination, was gone. A GoFundMe campaign was launched to support his grieving family, and Yosemite officials issued stern warnings about the dangers of its deceptively beautiful rivers. On July 29th, 2023, friends, family, and those touched by Hayden's life gathered at the Marine Country Club to celebrate his memory. Tears mingled with laughter as they recounted his zest for life, his dedication to his passions, and the countless ways he had inspired those around him. Through a memorial fund supporting young athletes at Casa Grande High School, Hayden's legacy continues, a testament to a life lived boldly, even if it ended far too soon. Hayden's tragic story is a stark reminder of nature's duality. Its beauty can be as deadly as it is enchanting, yet his memory endures not as a tale of sorrow, but as a celebration of the boundless spirit of a young man who lived every moment to its fullest.
On July 4th, 2023, the shimmering waters of Lake Yosemite gleamed under the golden summer sun, a lively hub of holiday cheer. Families filled the shorelines, spreading out picnic blankets, tossing frisbees, and snapping photos beneath the fluttering red, white, and blue banners. Kids darted about with sparklers in hand, their giggles blending with the rhythmic splash of swimmers and the distant hum of jet skis. Among the revelers soaking in the festivities was Brandon Mendez, a spirited young man with a contagious smile and boundless energy. For Brandon and his family, this man-made lake, a sprawling 500-acre reservoir, was the perfect spot to celebrate Independence Day. Lake Yosemite buzzed with activity. Jet skis zipped across its surface in daring arcs, kayakers paddled lazily along its edges, and swimmers splashed through its chilly, murky waters. Despite its allure, the lake lacked lifeguards, leaving safety in the hands of those bold enough to dive in. Brandon, known for his zest for life, wasn't one to shy away from an adventure. Standing at the edge of the pier, he seemed to radiate excitement as he prepared to join the throngs of swimmers enjoying the water's cool reprieve. With a wide grin and an enthusiastic leap, Brandon plunged into the lake. The splash drew a few glances from nearby families, but soon all eyes returned to their own celebrations. For a moment, Brandon's dive was just another scene in a joyful mosaic of summer fun. But as seconds turned to minutes and Brandon didn't resurface, the carefree energy that filled the day began to waver. At first, his family remained calm, scanning the surface of the lake and calling out his name. But with no sign of him, their worry quickly turned to panic. Frantic now, they combed the water near the pier, shouting for Brandon. their voices edged with fear. By 4:17 p.m., the growing sense of dread prompted them to call the Merced County Sheriff's Department. Officers arrived swiftly, organizing a search effort as the family described Brandon's last moments. Hope hung in the air as divers entered the lake, but the task before them was daunting. The water, churned by hours of activity, was dark and murky. Its depths, reaching up to 53 feet, were cold and uninviting, a sharp contrast to the bustling scene earlier that day. Time dragged on, each passing hour adding to the heaviness of the search. Finally, at 9:35 p.m., the sheriff's dive team made the heartbreaking discovery. Brandon's body was recovered from the lake, shattering the faint hope that had sustained his family. The joyous celebration that began the day had ended in unspeakable tragedy. Brandon Mendez, a beloved young man, promising athlete and cherished member of his community, was gone. In the days that followed, the loss was felt deeply across Merced. A candlelight vigil at McNamara Park brought together family, friends, and teammates who shared stories of Brandon's infectious spirit. His soccer team, Merced United, mourned not just the loss of a talented player, but a close friend who had been gearing up for an exciting tournament. What had started as a day of laughter and celebration became a somber reminder of nature's unpredictability. Lake Yosemite, once alive with splashes and cheers, now stood silent, holding the weight of a life lost too soon. For Brandon's family and the community, the 4th of July would forever bear the shadow of that devastating day, a reminder of the fragility that lies beneath life's most vibrant moments.
As the rain subsided on May 16, 2015, the skies over Yosemite National Park began to clear, casting a golden glow over the iconic cliffs and valleys. For Dean Potter and Graham Hunt, the call of adventure was irresistible. These were not ordinary men. They were base-jumping pioneers, daring to leap from the heavens into the unknown with nothing but wingsuits and parachutes to guide their descent. That evening, they would embark on a flight that would cement their names in the annals of tragedy. Dean Potter, at 43, was a legend, a trailblazer in the world of extreme sports, renowned for his mastery of climbing, slacklining, and base jumping. Beside him was 29-year-old Graham Hunt, a man following in Potter's fearless footsteps. Together, they shared a bond forged in the face of gravity's defiance, bound by their mutual love for the skies and the freedom they found there. That fateful evening, the duo, accompanied by Potter's longtime partner Jen Rapp, made their way to Taft Point, a breathtaking 7,500-foot promontory overlooking Yosemite's timeless landmarks. It wasn't just a jump, it was a ritual, a communion with the untamed beauty of nature, but it was also a risk. Base jumping was illegal in Yosemite, forcing the men to wait until dusk cloaked their daring escapade in shadow. By 7:25 p.m., Potter and Hunt stood on the edge of eternity, their wingsuits zipped and ready. The wind whispered across the precipice, but Potter's vast experience assured him the conditions were manageable. The two adventurers exchanged a final look, a silent acknowledgement of the trust between them, and then they leapt into the void. Potter aimed for the notch in the ridge, a V-shaped gap he had navigated countless times. Hunt veered left, then abruptly shifted back toward the right, an uncharacteristic move that drew Jen's concerned gaze. And then they vanished. A sharp, chilling noise pierced the air. A second, duller thud followed, echoing through the valley like a heartbeat fading into silence. Jen froze, her mind unwilling to process the implications. She waited, staring into the abyss, desperate for the signal, a flare of a parachute, a triumphant shout, anything to break the growing dread. But the valley remained eerily still. Hours passed, and when Potter and Hunt failed to return, Jen's fears became undeniable. She contacted Graham's girlfriend, Rebecca Haney, and together they alerted Yosemite's chief of staff, Mike Gauthier. The search began, every second carrying the weight of hope and dread. The first light of dawn on May 17th revealed the devastating truth. A California state helicopter spotted the crash site. Rangers descended to the jagged rocks below and confirmed the worst. Both Dean Potter and Graham Hunt were gone. Their bodies were recovered, their wings forever clipped. At Taft Point, where they had last stood together, friends and admirers created a shrine, a beer can, feathers, Tibetan prayer flags, and a photograph of Potter. It was a quiet tribute to men who had dared to dance with death on their own terms. The exact cause of the tragedy remains a haunting mystery. Did Hunt's veering maneuvers create a turbulent air pocket that doomed Potter? Or did Potter, witnessing Hunt's fatal crash, lose focus in a moment of heartbreak? The only witness to the final seconds of their flight was the silent valley itself. Yosemite, eternal and unyielding, remains both a witness and a guardian of their story. Its cliffs and skies now echo with their legacy, a reminder of humanity's unyielding spirit, the beauty of risk, and the fragility of life on the edge.
More than a century ago, Half Dome, Yosemite National Park's legendary granite giant, got its final 400-foot ascent fitted with cables. Towering at 8,800 feet above sea level, this iconic rock formation has captured the imagination of adventurers for generations. Its allure lies not only in its breathtaking beauty, but also in its formidable challenge. The 17-mile round-trip trail is a grueling test of endurance, culminating in the infamous Cable Route, a steep, heart-pounding climb where hikers must pull themselves up using cables bolted into the rock. For those who conquer it, the reward is an unrivaled view of Yosemite's splendor. Danielle Burnett, a 29-year-old nature lover, was one of many who felt the irresistible pull of Half Dome's peak. Danielle, a social media manager from Lake Havasu City, Arizona, had a deep love for the outdoors. Hiking, especially to spots with stunning vistas, was one of her greatest passions. On September 5, 2019, she arrived at Yosemite, ready to take on Half Dome. She had secured a highly sought-after permit through the park's lottery system, a requirement for anyone attempting the challenging trek. The Half Dome Trail is no ordinary hike. With nearly 4,800 feet of elevation gain, it's as demanding as it is beautiful. Hikers face steep inclines, changing weather conditions, and the sheer mental and physical toll of the climb. For many, the final stretch, the Cable Route, is the ultimate test. Here, the granite slopes sharply upward, and hikers must rely on the cables for stability. It's a daunting climb, even for the experienced. Danielle, however, seemed ready for the challenge. The hike began smoothly for her. Step by step, she made her way up the trail, joining countless others who had taken on the same journey. But as Danielle reached the Cable Route, the weather began to change. A light sprinkle of rain fell, turning the granite slick and significantly increasing the risk. The once grippy rock now posed a serious threat. Sean Slim and his group were also on the cables that day. From below, they noticed a commotion. Looking up, Slim saw Danielle struggling. The rain appeared to have unsettled her, and she was visibly panicked. Deciding the climb wasn't worth the risk, Danielle attempted to turn back. Tragically, the decision came too late. As Slim watched, Danielle's shoes lost traction on the wet granite. She slipped, losing her grip on the cables, and began sliding down the rock face. Slim and a friend rushed to try to help, but she was already out of reach. In a devastating moment, Danielle tumbled over 500 feet down the granite slope. Her screams echoed across the mountain before everything fell silent. Park rangers and emergency responders arrived quickly, evacuating hikers from the trail to make way for a rescue helicopter. By the time Danielle's body was recovered, it was too late. Her family's worst fears were realized. Danielle, a vibrant young woman with so much ahead of her, was gone. Her sister, Nicole Burnett, expressed the family's heartbreak on Facebook, writing, "It's with a broken heart to inform you all that our beautiful Danielle left us yesterday, doing something she loved so much." Danielle was the 12th known victim of Half Dome's climb since 1995. Her tragic story is a sobering reminder of the fine line between nature's awe-inspiring beauty and its unforgiving dangers. For all who venture into the wilderness, her story underscores the importance of preparation, caution, and respect for the unpredictable power of the natural world.